battling your way through this sort of nonsense. It's classic terrain for anything with a Land Rover badge on it. There's not really much call for one of these, but apparently this is now also Land Rover terrain. 0-62 in 3.8 seconds. 3.6 if you have it on the summer tyres. That is a 0-60 time faster than a 911.
Welcome to the Range Rover Sport SV, an off-roader that you could find filling your mirrors at a track day. If this film raises your ride height, then please think about joining the Hagerty Drivers Club. You get a magazine that's award-winning, and if you're worried about reliability, you'll appreciate the 24/7 roadside assistance. To discover all the benefits, just click on the link in the description down below. Recently, there's been a spate of road cars blurring the lines. Instead of taking something fast and making it faster, they've done, well, the opposite. Cars like this, the 911 Dakar.
I happen to really like the way that things like this drive, and I suppose things like the Lamborghini Starato and the Morgan CX-T as well, but fundamentally I love the concept of them just sitting still with their bigger arches. This looks great in Irish green, this particular one. There's just something cool about the whole concept of it. And I think the Range Rover Sport SV also falls into this category. It also blurs the lines, just from the opposite direction to something like the Dakar, because its small band of engineers have taken the Range Rover Sport and put it into a wholly different arena. And whilst, yes, the concept might be a little bit baffling, I'm not even sure that I like it, but I do find it fascinating. I love the thought process that's gone into it and the engineering behind it.
Take this blurring of lines to the extreme, and that's when you reach the desire to have versions of our fine four-fendered friends that are amphibious or can fly.
This really feels pretty much as extraordinary as being in a car and then taking off, or driving into the water to go across an ocean. This shouldn't do this.
Autodromo Portimao, with its roller coaster changes in elevation, is quite the test for a race car, let alone something that weighs over 2.5 tonnes. But it's immediately obvious that the SV is not normal.
The first thing that you notice in this is the steering, I think, because the standard Range Rover Sport now is, well, it's very Range Rover. It has a steering ratio of about 17:1, and this 13.6:1, the ratio, which really is kind of supercar quick, and they've switched to a completely fixed ratio rack. So you instantly notice just how much quicker, more accurately it steers, just how kind of almost un-Range Rover it is in its responses.
This is of course matched to an uprated rear-wheel steering system too, one that provides more agility at higher speeds. But this steering would be absolutely no good with a standard chassis.
The goals that they set out for this car 5 years ago were that it had to pull a G laterally at its limit, and it had to do that with just 2.5 degrees of roll. And for that, they had to design, well, basically an entirely new suspension system.
Instead of the electronic anti-roll control systems we're used to seeing on SUVs, the engineers at SVO have gone a different route, one that they say offers significantly more resistance. Dubbed 6D Dynamics, it's a network of hydraulically connected dampers, very like the system that's been used on McLarens with proactive chassis control. The difference with this is that it controls dive and squat as well as roll. And it's not the only thing they've done either. Because under here, they've had to re-engineer the rear subframe so that these lower arms have much lower pickup points. You can clearly see the angle change of those arms compared to this standard Range Rover Sport. The benefits are a much lower roll centre, and when the ride height drops 15mm in SV mode, there is also an extra half degree of camber.
This is genuinely so impressive. Is it the best track car I've ever driven? No, but for what I know the standard car is like, it's basically unrecognisable. It's a car you still have to be quite sort of delicate with your inputs in a way to get the best out of it. So really think about how the car wants to be driven. Still don't overdrive it. Curbs are obviously not a problem. Just feel it sort of skip at the edge, but it stays flat, and it stays flat as you're pushing it. It doesn't dip away, which is the reason they had to go away from the electronic anti-roll bar system, because that kind of just couldn't cope at the very outer limits. It's nice, you can just trail brake into the corner, pick it up, and then drive it on the throttle. These brakes are the biggest, I think, carbon brakes on a production car. So 440mm discs. They're made by Brembo, but they are specific to this car. So they're not pinched off anything else. Anecdotally, speaking to the engineers as well, they just haven't had to do any brake changes at all during this launch. And this is a circuit that certainly feels pretty heavy on brakes at times.
You probably won't be stunned to hear that this is the first time that a Range Rover has had carbon ceramic brakes. The fact that these 8-piston caliper monsters cost £7,000 probably won't be a surprise either, and that's on top of a list price of £171,000, plus however much it costs to insure an SV. It makes you wonder if it can be commercially viable, but all 2,500 first editions sold without a problem. And of course, about 2 of those will ever get driven on track, probably by accident. So we really ought to head out onto the road. But before we go anywhere, there's something we should talk about.
Let's talk about carbon fibre, because there's actually quite a lot of it on this particular SV. It's here on the badge, around the grille there, down there, up here. In fact, the entirety of this bonnet is carbon fibre. It looks very nice when you open it up. But honestly, dynamically, you're not going to feel the difference on a car that weighs 2.5 tonnes or even a bit more. But even on a car this heavy, there is one place where it will make a dynamic difference. Unsprung and rotating mass, down here.
Yes, for £7,000 you can have 23-inch carbon fibre wheels that save over 5 kilos or nearly 30% per corner compared to the forged alloys that come as standard on the SV. That's a 9 kilo saving when compared to the cast items on a normal Range Rover Sport. They're made by Carbon Revolution, and the front rims have a heat-resistant ceramic coating on the back of the spokes. At 12.8 kilos each, they're not feathery light, but that's because they still have to be tough enough to cope with all the same Land Rover type scenarios that the alloy wheels do. Now, for our road drive, these ones are wrapped in the SV's standard all-season tyres as opposed to the summers that we had on track. You'll also notice that I've switched sides.
So do the other modes in here, comfort and dynamic, do they still make a difference? Are they noticeable? Do they live up to their names? Yes. We'll come back to them in just a second, because before we get to them, actually accessing them I want to talk about, because well, for some reason Land Rover has taken away the buttons down here. We now have the gear selector and the start-stop button and nothing else. You used to have the mode selector here, which is nice, and then the climate control things down here, but it's all on this screen now. And whilst I like the look of this screen because it's really sharp and crystal clear, it's not the quickest, I think, in terms of its response, and it's nice, as we say, having physical buttons down here to use, particularly I think for the change in modes when you also want to go off-road and things like that. You want a physical button, so that's not so good and seems to go against the trend really. But what about the modes? Comfort works. It is genuinely still really, really comfortable in this. If we then pop it into dynamic, things definitely get more interesting. The car generally feels happier, certainly on a bit of road like this. Oh, that's the only problem. When you start to push this a bit harder, you really need to turn the stability control, well, either into track mode, which you need to do in SV mode, or off, because otherwise it just doesn't like it if you start driving in any sort of a spirited way. It just wants to start grabbing brakes, and it's not a happy thing. You suddenly feel all of those forces that it's trying to control, and it does want to rein them in. It's very aware that it's got a big lot of mass to cope with in the corners and keep safe.
We'll come to the SV mode in a minute, but you might have noticed that one thing I've been a bit quiet about is the powertrain. The 4.4 litre twin-turbo mild hybrid V8 from BMW puts out 625 brake horsepower and 590 pounds-foot of torque, and the 8-speed ZF Auto shifts swiftly and smoothly. There's absolutely nothing wrong with its performance, it just doesn't stand out particularly.
It will feel strange if you've driven this car's predecessor, the Range Rover Sport SVR, because it's really, well, this is the yin and yang. It's the complete opposite of that car in terms of that had the engine as its centerpiece, that bombastic, raucous engine. And in this, it's all about the chassis really. The engine is there, but it's not an unpleasant sound. It's quite nice actually. It's sort of vaguely mellifluous, but it's not something that really sort of puts the hairs up on the back of your neck.
And it feels like Land Rover might have been aware of that, because it's upgraded the hi-fi system.
You see, these seats hide a secret. They might just look sportier with their fixed headrests and more bucket-like appearance, but if I turn this music on here, via here, because obviously there's no switch down here now for volume, this music, I can feel it as well as hear it. It's a bit like somebody's put a load of, I suppose, electric toothbrushes in this seat. And it's only in the seat, it's not in the rest of the car. They're very controlled vibrations.
Developed with Canadian company Subpack, these tremblings transmit the sound through haptics, your muscles, and even bone conductivity to help improve the fidelity of the music, particularly the bass. Interestingly, the vibrations are said to both calm you and increase your awareness, making driving all at once safer and more relaxing.
Woo! A bit like a massage as well.
Right, back to that final dynamic setting.
SV mode. Can you use it on the road? Well, again, with the proviso that you actually turn the ESC at least to track, yes, that works as well, amazingly, and it's really quite fun.
The all-season tyres work really well too, and are still capable of generating 1.1 G laterally.
It's arguably every bit as impressive on the road as it was on track, actually. I know this is not a particularly bumpy road, but it's kind of good fun. The thing that I really like about these modes as well is that the thing that really differentiates them is the chassis. It's the ride quality and that roll control. In comfort mode and dynamic mode, the steering and in some ways the throttle response don't change that much compared to SV mode, because obviously the steering ratio stays exactly the same. The alacrity is undimmed from SV mode. You still got that 13.6 to 1, and even in comfort mode it's nice having that bit of, well, extra sort of precision. It makes this feel like a much smaller car than the standard Range Rover Sport. I actually think that some of this really should make its way into the standard Range Rover Sport, because the trouble that car's had is that you can really feel the Range Rover in it, but I think perhaps not enough of the Sport, particularly given that the standard Range Rover, so the full fat Range Rover perhaps we should call it, has become, well, more dynamic thanks to that rear wheel steer principally. And so it's sort of, well, I suppose blurred the lines between those two cars. And I think this needs to differentiate itself more, and a lot of what's in this car could go into the standard Range Rover Sport. Perhaps obviously not the full-on SV mode, but the rest of it I think would really work.
So there we are, the rather extraordinary Range Rover Sport SV. A luxurious SUV one minute, track monster the next. A vehicle that blurs the lines like a 911 Dakar.
But I think the Range Rover Sport SV is arguably, well, even more impressive than something like the Dakar, because whilst I don't think anybody would really expect a Dakar to keep up with a GT3 on a track day, you do kind of expect the Range Rover Sport SV to keep up with its brethren off-road. And that's how Land Rover's designed it. It's the fact that this can still raise its ride height right up and go off-road. Carbon fibre wheels and all, if you have no concerns for cosmetics whatsoever. I think it's quite cool in a way, once you got that first scratch out of the way. Because if it couldn't do this, this car would be pointless. I don't think I'd have even bothered coming to review it. It's the fact that it has that extraordinary breadth of ability, that they haven't taken out its primary terrain. It's traditional Land Rover terrain. I don't even say it's the only terrain now, the traditional Land Rover terrain. The fact that it can still do that and do what it does on the track, that's what makes this car certainly fascinating.